The movie begins on March 19, 2003. Iraqi General Mohammed al-Rai flees his residence amid the bombardment of Baghdad. Before leaving the compound, he passes a notebook to his aide Syed, instructing him to warn his officers to get to their safe houses and wait for his signal. 4 weeks later, U.S. Army Chief Warrant Officer Roy Miller and his platoon are on a mission to check a warehouse for Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. Miller briefs his platoon about the location. It's a military storage site, DNA and intel estimate. Possible nerve agents, choking agents, live pathogens, chemical-tipped missiles. He says the 1 or 1st Airborne Division has been there all morning, so the site is secure to Miller's surprise. The warehouse has not been secured, with looters making their way in and out. Miller calls for Lieutenant Asser, who is in charge of the site. Assert tells him that there is a sniper in a tower in front of them, and that he couldn't set up the perimeter as soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division are too few to do much. Miller gathers his men to inform them that the weapons are in the northwest end of the complex. There is a sniper hole up in the big tower near them, and so they're going to have to take him out quickly upon discovering that the sniper is on the 5th floor. Southeast corner room, Miller decides to draw him out so that his shooters can take him out after taking down the sniper. Miller finds that the warehouse is empty. Miller is confused as to how there could be nothing there and says this is the 3rd consecutive time. He has found nothing. The intel, though, is confirmed to come from the United Nations afterward. Miller meets with Colonel Bethel to inform him that the intel they're getting is unreliable, leading them nowhere. Bethel tells him that they're being blamed for not moving fast enough about the confiscation of the WMD. Bethel warns Miller not to make any waves, as they don't want to hear that. Back in Washington, he says all they're interested in is finding something they can hold up on CNN later. A debriefing is given by Captain Jonathan V.A., who states that they're continuing to target priority sites since all the people back home are anxiously awaiting the information that they found these weapons. He further explains that they have a detailed media plan that involves the top-rated media in the United States and the UK, so that they're prepared to cover all aspects of the good news. Miller raises his hand, states and the UK, so that they're prepared to cover all aspects of the good news. Miller raises his hand to bring up the point. The majority of the intel given to him is inaccurate, and anonymous high-ranking officials quickly dismiss his concerns, saying that it's solid and good to go. But Miller persists in his argument, mentioning the D1A site in the previous week, and how the 101st took casualties securing it for them, only to find it was a toilet factory. He says there's a disconnect between what they receive and what they're seeing on the ground, that there is a problem with the intelligence. The officials remind him that his job is to only execute his commands, and not to worry about how they're provided with the team's next mission site. Is at Almer afterward. CIA agent Martin Brown approaches Miller and introduces himself, where he asks Miller if he's going to the Al-Mansur site in Baghdad. When Miller confirms, Martin tells him he's only going to be wasting his time, as the next place he is to search was already inspected by a UN biological team 2 months before, and that it too has been confirmed empty afterward. Martin gives him his card and tells him he's right, that this thing doesn't add up. He says they have to figure out what it is, and instructs Miller to call him if he finds anything. While Miller and his team approach their destination, the road gets crowded by angry and desperate Iraqi civilians. Miller orders some of his men to get out of the track and clear out the traffic. But as they're getting too exposed to the enemy, he orders his team to get back, and they keep moving without stopping. Poundstone is under orders to install Ahmed Zubidi as the head of the Iraqi, and he states that they are convening an Iraqi Freedom Convention inside the Green Zone. The following day, they are expected to have representatives from all 3 main ethnic groups, the Kurds, the Shia, and the Sunni, angling for different levels of power. On the contrary, CIA agent Brown says that Zubidi hasn't been to Iraq for 30 years, and believes that his returning from an exile has no standing in there. Poundstone states that he's the best they have right now for a stable democracy, as he's been a help to them, and their office is extremely satisfied with all the information they've gotten from him. Martin believes that Zubidi has been selling them fake information for years, and says he's unreliable when Poundstone argues that Martin is questioning every single piece of evidence that's coming in, up to the point where they can't make any progress. Martin responds by saying they cannot just hand the country over to an exile no one has ever heard of, and so they need to have the Iraqi army play a role in stabilizing the country. Poundstone is opposed, as that's not what we can sell to the American people. Martin warns of civil war in 6 months if the army is cut out of the new Iraq. Meanwhile, an Iraqi civilian who calls himself Freddy sees a bunch of Iraq high officials entering a house. He quickly gets in his car and leaves the people in the house, including General Ali and his officers, and aides in Baghdad who are discussing the current situation. Among the aides is Sayed, who is the host of the meeting, where he states that the information they have is that Saddam has fled. The Americans will occupy the entire country, and they will face hard choices while their men wait for orders. He concludes by saying that what they decide now will determine the future of Iraq, while checking yet another unpromising site. Miller hears some disturbing sounds when he goes over to find out what it is when a man is pinned down to the ground by Sergeant Wilkins, who tells Miller that the man is out of control. The man turns out to be Freddie, and Wilkins says he wants to talk to Miller about something important. Freddie calms down after he's let go and tells Miller that he saw some bath party VIPs meeting in a nearby home. When Miller asks why he should believe him, Freddie simply answers, saying that he's just here to help. So he takes Freddie with him and orders his men to take Freddie's car and get one other. If they roll over there in those Humvees, the BTH is going to see them coming. Miller gathers his men and briefs of the plan. In the first car, he wants to take the Iraqi guy Freddie, with him riding shotgun and one of the soldiers in the back, covering Freddie the entire time. The rest of the men are going to roll in the pickup truck behind them. Concurrently, a heated argument ensues. During the discussion between the Bists, and Ali steps in to end the argument. Ali says the streets are full of anarchy and violence in Iraq increases. And while the Americans try to manufacture democracy eventually, they will realize they need them. So he decides to wait for the Americans to offer him a deal for the future of Iraq and fight if they don't. As the meeting ends, Miller and his men arrive at the location and see some people leave the house holding firearms when they get into a car. Miller quickly orders his team to seize the car with the 3 men inside it, and then the house upon realizing the situation. Ali and his men immediately make their way to escape. As the team bursts into the house, a brief gunfight ensues. Ali narrowly escapes, but Syed is captured. Miller brings Freddie to be his translator and asks Seed questions like what the meeting was about, but the man refuses to speak. Miller confiscates Ali's notebook, and they take Syed back to camp to ask him if he knows about the WMDs and where they are. Syed says only Ali knows about these things. Miller asks him how he can find Ali, but Syed will only reveal his location if Miller can protect his family. And so Miller agrees before Miller can extract much information. Syed is taken away by Special Operations personnel. However, Miller keeps Ali's notebook while being taken away. Seed mentions his notebook being confiscated by Miller, and so the Special Operations leader confronts him if he has it. As Miller denies the claim, the two forces get into a fight, where Miller subtly hands the book to Freddie to hide it after confirming Miller doesn't have the notebook. The Special Operation forces leave afterwards. Miller and his men realize Freddie is gone, with the notebook immediately spread out. And eventually, Miller catches up to Freddie while having a hard time trying to climb over a wall because of his prosthetic leg. Freddie claims he was going to come back to give it to him after the fight earlier was over. Meanwhile, Dee complains to Poundstone again, but he states that the stakes are much larger than her role in selling newspapers. D&E implies that her paper published stories of WMD based on Poundstone's intel, and now needs access to Mellon, the source behind all this. Intel Miller goes to Martin's hotel room in the Green Zone, where he tells him what happened and gave him the notebook. Martin arranges for Miller to get into the prison, where Syed is being interrogated. Miller is then approached by D&E, who questions him about the false reports of WMDS. Miller bluffs his way in to see Syed near death after being tortured. He tells Miller that they did everything you asked us to in the meeting. When Miller asks what meeting he is talking about, he says one word. Jordan Miller then confronts D&E about the bogus intel she published, but she refuses to identify Mellon, her source, after Miller tells her he suspects that Aloy is Mellon. Danny reluctantly confirms that Mellon met with a high-ranking official in February, and Jordan Miller realizes that Poundstone's men are hunting Ali, and can think of only one reason Ali confirmed there was no Rocky WMD program, and is now a major liability. Poundstone confiscates the notebook from Martin. It contains the locations of Ali's safe houses. When Miller tries to arrange a meeting with Ali, he is abducted by Ali's men following Poundstone's announcement of the decision to disband the entire Iraqi army. Alawi tells Miller that he informed Poundstone that the WMD program had been dismantled after the first Persian Gulf War. Poundstone, however, reported that Ali had confirmed there were WMDs, so the US government would have an excuse to invade Iraq. Poundstone's men attack the locations listed in the notebook. When they get to the general's hiding place, he flees, ordering one man to kill Miller. Miller manages to kill his captor and races after Ali. Miller finally captures Ali, but Freddie suddenly appears and shoots the general, stating that the fate of Iraq is not his. To decide, Freddie believes that Ali is a tyrant and a traitor to the Iraqi population, with his only witness against Poundstone. Now dead, Miller tells Freddie to flee later. Miller writes a scathing report. He confronts Poundstone in a meeting and gives him the report, but Poundstone dismisses it, telling Miller that WMDs do not matter. Poundstone then rejoins the meeting only to see Iraqi factional leaders reject Zubidi, the US's choice as leader of Iraq, as an American puppet, and storm out afterwards. Dini receives Miller's report by email. The recipient list includes reporters for major news agencies around the world. The movie ends on a somber note, highlighting the consequences of war and the impact of political decisions on the lives of soldiers and civilians, alike with movie. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen. And don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.